Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Senator Perkins. I am really delighted to be here. My distinguished panelists, hello. And I'd also like to thank the New York State Black and Puerto Rican Legislative Caucus for holding this event. My name is Bisa Williams. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Department of State for African Affairs. I cover all of West Africa in the Bureau of African Affairs for our bilateral issues, and I cover all of Sub-Saharan Africa for our economic issues. So I'm here today to talk about opportunities in Africa, and I must tell you, I'm delighted to have this opportunity. I just came back a week and a half ago from a trade mission in Cote d'Ivoire that was sponsored by the Corporate Council on Africa. And on that trade mission, we had about 12 American businesses. And this was an event that attracted over 4,000 people. It was a fabulous investment trade fair, the Cote d'Ivoire sponsored. And I was happy to see that among the 12, we had about, I'd say about half of them were African American or minority businesses, and minority and women businesses. But there are, that's good, but there are only 12. And that's still not enough for the immense opportunities that exist for American businesses, and particularly for minority and smaller firms, smaller businesses. So the panel before this one was a great lesson on being concise, something that people at the Department of State are not known for. So I'm taking a page from their book, and although I had a lot of things I was going to read to you and talk about, I'm going to just identify a couple of points with some examples and then allow time for question and answer. So I want you to just sort of hold on to these key issues. My first point to encourage to talk about the opportunities in Africa is that doing business in Africa is really good for business. According to McKinsey's, the McKinsey Global Institute, the collective GDP for the countries in Africa in 2008 was $1.6 trillion. Now that's roughly equal to the GDP of Russia or Brazil. And that collective GDP is expected to rise to $2.6 trillion in 2020. The rate of return on foreign direct investment is higher in Africa than in any other region of the world. So the first point is doing business in Africa is really good for your business. The second point is that the demographics in Africa will ensure a market for you. The UN has predicted recently that Africa could add 1 billion people by the year 2050. And it could have 3.5 billion people by the end of this century. Thus, there's no loss of a market. Among the fastest growing countries on the continent, according to the Economist Intelligence Unit, for projected fastest growth in 2014 are South Sudan, Eritrea, Sierra Leone, and Zimbabwe. They all made the top 10 list. So that's the second point. Demographics there. People are there. Your buyers, your vendors, your future partners are there. The third point, the continent's resources have not been developed to their potential. Africa's natural resource endowment is basically extraordinary. It has an abundance of oil and gas and minerals. We hear all about that. But we don't hear so much that the continent is really poised to experience its own sort of green revolution. The continent of Africa contains 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. That is the size of about 600 million hectares, or roughly the size of the United States of America east of the Mississippi River. All of that uncultivated and arable. All of that waiting for U.S. technology, services, equipment, and expertise. Fourth point, democracy is on the rise. And that's important because in democratic countries, you have rule of law, you have accountability, you have banking systems, you have a willingness to lend credit. Democracy has expanded across the continent over the last 20 years. Ghana, Tanzania, Botswana, Mauritius, all those countries, democracy has taken firm root. There are some conflicts. There have been conflicts. But there are countries that have emerged from that conflict and restored. I just mentioned Cote d'Ivoire, the main case in point. The people in the countries of Africa have made it clear that democratic government is their choice. And so the struggles that you are seeing now, the tensions that you're seeing now, are how to perfect that, how to implant that, and make that real. But there isn't any going back on that commitment that people have made. So that's an important point. Now, the reality test on this is my fifth point. There are challenges. There are challenges to doing business on the continent. But those challenges can be overcome with our goods, our services, and our expertise. Those are all challenges that you'll find in Africa, are ones that we have already experienced and gone beyond. There's a lack of inexpensive, reliable power, and that's one of the main constraints to having to sustained economic growth. The 49 countries of sub-Saharan Africa, with a combined population of over 800 million people in that area, they generate roughly the same amount of electricity as the country of Spain, which has a population of 45 million people. Nigeria, which is the continent's largest, most populous country, the total electricity generated in Nigeria is roughly the same as we have for New York City's 5 boroughs. So the continent is literally in the dark. But what that means, so yes, is that a pain in the neck when the internet goes down, or when you go to a part of the country outside of the capital and you can't get your cell phone, you can't journalize anywhere? Yes. But what that means for businesses is that there are opportunities for you to have joint ventures, for you to figure out, well, I think I'll go somewhere and put a solar panel up, or find a way to help the country thrive and help my business thrive in a more remote part. And I'll get to opportunities that the government is offering in just that sector in a minute. So the fifth point is, yes, there are challenges, but they are challenges that American businesses know how to overcome. Sixth point, the competition is not waiting. The competition is there. Chinese businesses are there. Indian businesses are there. French businesses are there. But there are programs to help American businesses catch up. That's what I'm sort of here to talk about today. And some of those programs are OPIC, for example. Most of you, I think, have heard of the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. OPIC has grown over the years, and so if you haven't looked at its website in the last 3 years, I urge you to do so, because it provides loans. It provides loans and loan guarantees. It provides risk insurance, and it provides support for investment funds. OPIC is helping American companies grow into emerging markets, including to those emerging markets in Africa. There's also the Export-Import Bank, which is the official export credit authority agency of the U.S. government, which helps finance American businesses that want to export U.S. goods and services for some of these projects, for example, for infrastructure or road projects. There's also the USTDA, the Trade and Development Authority. It's a small authority, but do not underestimate it. It can be key, and it is there for you to take advantage of. It helps link businesses to export opportunities by funding project planning, risk assessments, pilot projects. When you're just considering a venture, go to TDA and find out what resources might be available to you. Not enough American companies, and certainly not enough minority and women companies, are taking advantage of the opportunities that already exist and the instruments that we have to support American businesses. Okay, so the idea is that, I'll say that there are agencies to help. My seventh point, the big companies, big American companies, are not shying away from Africa. GE, IBM, Walmart, Hewlett-Packard, Cummins, Tasty Foods, Amazon, all of them are there and all of them are expanding. But there are opportunities, I believe, for smaller and mid-sized businesses in Africa, and I would really like for some of you to think about that. There are excellent opportunities for joint ventures, because what you have in some of these countries, I've talked about, people always talk about Africa as if it's one big place. It's a continent. Sub-Saharan Africa has 49 distinct countries with different personalities and different assets. And very often, their production is of such a scale that it doesn't necessarily interest a GE, or it won't interest Hewlett-Packard. or Halliburton. But a mid-sized business could do a project in one of these smaller countries, or a company that's looking to import light bulbs or baskets or textiles could make an investment in one of these smaller companies, and that could be the cornerstone of a tremendous growth for a mid-sized company that would not necessarily even pique the interest of a bigger company. So my seventh point is the big companies haven't shied away, and the smaller and mid-sized companies really need to reassess what they're really willing to risk in order to invest. We can talk more about scale in questions. So I've got lots of data. Boeing is there. AES is operating a large electricity distribution company in Cameroon. Walmart is going to be all over Africa. Okay. And last but not least, President Obama has made a commitment to helping economic development in Africa. And yes, that's going to be important for the African states, but of course, he's a US president, and there is a win for American businesses. President Obama went to Africa last year in June, and he announced 2 new initiatives that are, and an extension of a more robust AGOA initiative, something that's been going on. So I want to talk about 3 of the economic initiatives that we have going on the continent before I close out. The first is what we call AGOA, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. It's named after a bill. And what AGOA does is to give a trade advantage for goods made in Africa to be exported and to enter the United States at a lower or completely reduced or zero tariff. And the idea was to help build up African manufacturing and to help build up the business class private sector, economic development in African countries. And AGOA has been extremely successful. Every year there's an AGOA forum. There will be another one this August in Washington, D.C., the AGOA forum, where the countries come together and talk about what they're producing. There are ministerial meetings to talk about what's going on at our trade balance and what's going on in their economies. But the important thing about AGOA is that a lot of things you'll see in Victoria's Secret or Learners or Nordstrom's, they're really products that are coming out of Africa that are going to our American stores. Some of the African countries are having difficulty trying to manage our market. Our country is big, they can't find a niche. So we need American buyers. We need to find stores. If you're looking for interesting, either unique African style goods, or you want to go make a better pair of jeans, so you make them in Africa and then you have them exported to your store. All those things would fall under the AGOA Act. And you would be a great benefit to those businesses and to your own to help the African businesses find American counterparts. There's also the Trade Africa Initiative. The Trade Africa Initiative that President Obama started is going to focus on East Africa, on the East African Economic Community. I mentioned the population group, but you realize in Africa only 11% of commerce in Africa is between and among the African states themselves. That means, well over 80% of their trade goes out of the continent. There's a huge market, country to country, right on the continent. And that's something that American businesses should take advantage of. Part of the reason they're not able to, and even the Africans can't, is that the roads aren't there. The customs and duties levels, regulations from country to country differ. So we are helping, we're providing technical expertise, we're thinking about providing a sort of trade facility agreement to help the countries in East Africa, and that's Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, be able to better ensure trade among themselves, better be able to get their goods to the port of Mombasa, and then to export out, so that businesses right in that region then can grow and thrive, which will help then export other businesses on the continent. So Trade Africa is an important initiative that we have that also will redound to American businesses. And the last is Power Africa. I mentioned that most of Africa was really in the dark. President Obama has tried to do something about that by creating an initiative that is going to support transactions. So it's going to support the creation of access to electricity for 20 million African households. We have identified 6 states where the states are already, 6 countries, where the countries are already working on their regulations, so they're trying to get their regulatory house in order, where they've already made some progress in building up their infrastructure and they need that extra boost. And we are working in those countries, and we're working with the private businesses that have already begun the projects. Yes, GE's doing a lot of, but we're also talking about off-grid access to power, solar, hydro. This initiative was designed to increase access to electricity, to enhance security, of course, to reduce poverty, and to advance economic growth. When you get the electricity going outside of the capitals, when you get the rest of the African continent really lit up, then you'll have more interest from American and foreign businesses. So we're very excited about that. We're planning, the initiative is focused on, right now, on Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, Nigeria, and Liberia. And that's just for this first year. And we think that it will add about 10,000 megawatts of cleaner and more efficient electricity, increasing opportunities for U.S. businesses and foreign investment. And while those 6 countries are our focus countries, should a company, for example, if you have a solar company and you're already in the midst of your negotiation or your project in a country that, Niger, for example, where I was the former ambassador, it doesn't preclude, it doesn't exclude you from also benefiting from Power Africa. You bring your proposal, you bring your project to the Power Africa group, and it can be evaluated to see whether or not you can also get some support. The idea was to focus on the 6 that were the furthest advanced, but we are not saying no necessarily. We're not shutting the door to projects that other businesses have underway. The good thing about this program, aside from the fact that it is really geared at exploding access to electricity, is that it is business-led. States and government companies that have already who either have a project proposal on the table, who need help, either if they need facilitation through the embassy or the Department of Commerce, if they're having trouble securing their financing for the project, and the project is already established its bona fides as far as viability, then the government is going to step in. President Obama has said all the agencies, all the powers that we have to bear are going to kick in to expedite the agreement process. So we're really very positive about that. So those were I think there are 8 reasons why you should be interested in the opportunities to invest, to trade, and to expand your business, to start thinking about how to do business on the continent of Africa. The continent awaits you. The opportunities are endless. And your government is really here to help. So thank you.
That was great. Give another round of applause for me. So this guy's now Deputy Assistant Secretary for African Affairs. And 8 reasons, 6 countries of focus.
No. For Power Africa.
Right. 6 countries of focus for Power Africa. 49 countries in general. 8 good reasons. And I want to thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Our next panelist will be Mr. Leonard Jones of Panther Rice Financial Products Company.
Thank you, Senator. I'm so glad to be here to talk to everybody today. I'm a partner with Rice Financial Products Company, and I'm here as an example of a small company that has done business and invested in Africa. We're working on several projects in Africa right now, including some water projects in Ghana, some water, transportation, housing projects in Niger, and some equipment leasing projects in Nigeria. Personally, my interest in Africa goes way back, a long time. 20 years ago or so, when Nelson Mandela was getting released from jail and was going to be the next president of South Africa, and said that he wanted to build housing and roads and other type of infrastructure in Soweto and places in South Africa, I got excited. I had been working in public finance and infrastructure finance here in the United States for a number of years, and I decided I know how to do that. I'm going to go to South Africa to help. And I went to South Africa and ended up in Zambia, in Lusaka, Zambia, not too far away. In Zambia, I worked with the government for a couple of years, privatizing government-owned companies. It was a socialistic regime that had just become a capitalistic society, and the government had to sell all the companies they owned. I sold those companies for the government. I think now it would be called public-private partnerships. But we did it in a way to make sure that people didn't lose their jobs, that the private entities really were prevented from really taking advantage of the government-owned companies and were required to treat them well. After a couple of years of that, I did go to South Africa and work with the Development Bank of Southern Africa in financing infrastructure in Southern Africa. Eventually, I came back to the United States for some family reasons, and again started doing infrastructure finance here in the United States, and started working with a small firm, which is the firm I'm with now. Rice Financial has been around about 20 years. Until 5 years ago, all we did was infrastructure finance here in the United States. But I started listening to a lot of the information that the ambassador passed on to us maybe 5 years ago. Started seeing the growth in Africa, the number of people increasing, the democratization across the continent, the reduction in conflicts that were going on. And in addition, I'll add that you see the education level really increasing. It's also one of the youngest places around. Very young, eligible, enabled workforce. And what really struck me is the growth of Africa, the pace of growth. It took Europe thousands of years to get from A to B in the parts of its development. It took the United States only hundreds of years to make that same pace of development. It's taken Asia decades to do that same level of development. And now it seems to be hyper fast in Africa. I mean, the level of development is going to be so much quicker than anything that's ever been seen on the earth. And so I thought if you really want to be a part of that, now was the time to do it. And about 5 years ago, we started looking at where we could add the most value. As I said, we initially started with Ghana. Ghana's had a long history of democracy. They had some oil fields they found off of the coast that were going to provide a lot of revenues. They were very smart in putting together legislation to take some of that, those revenues from their oil field and make sure that they would be used for infrastructure development within the country. And that's where my expertise lies, in infrastructure finance. So we first started working with them and have about $900 million of water projects. And when we started looking at what to do in Africa, infrastructure is a huge need. It's probably the most crucial need. It's hard to have more educational facilities, more hospitals, those types of things, unless there's water. Water and sewer, unless there's power, unless there's transportation, roads, so you can get there. So we really consider infrastructure to be a crucial part of what needs to be developed in Africa. And I think it's a good place to start if you're interested in working in Africa. A couple of things to keep in mind. In addition to looking at the legislation there in the right environment, another thing you really have to do is have a partner wherever you're going to work. it's too far away to try to work on the telephone or on a computer and get anything done. Even if you have a couple of good relationships with the government or someone running a company over there, you really need to have a partner who's there on the ground that you can talk to on a regular basis, and you also need to go there and participate in things with them on a regular basis. It's really the only way to get business done. So, I found some partners there, and we have partners in all the places that we work in Africa. And after getting partners, the United States has not been the most progressive place working in Africa. And if you are really trying to move quickly, you may spend less time convincing some of the big American companies to go over there and more time dealing with some of the European companies or Asian companies that have actually been there for a while and are doing work there. Although it's becoming more and more feasible to see American companies there. I think a lot of the programs that President Obama put together, several of the programs that the ambassador mentioned, are helping American companies to become a little more proactive in some of the activity that's going on in Africa. So that's just a summary of what I've been doing there, and I look forward to answering questions that you may have as they come up. Thank you.
So now comes the cleanup day. And I know the mic is on, but I see people back there in the bleachers. I'm not quite sure if you have the benefit of the words of wisdom and advice that are being presented. So why don't we all kind of come up a little bit, come a little closer from the back row, if you don't mind. You can sneak out when you're ready, but it's just easier if you're a little closer, that's all. But do what you think is best. So we're going to have our next presentation by Mr. Mushin Robinson, who's the president and CEO of Williams Wallace Management Consultant, Inc.
I have a PowerPoint for you guys, and we're having a little technical issues. So if anybody wants it, we'll make sure that you can get it. I'll give you my email now, which is Musheer, M-U-S-H-E-E-R, Musheer, C like cat, Musheer C, at www2ws, M like Mary, C like Charlie, Inc., inc.com. And hopefully it'll be a little helpful for you. Yeah, it's Musheer, M-U-S-H-E-E-R-C, at www.mcinc.com. I've been doing business in Africa since 1972. I went to Oxford to medical school, and there was, at that time, this tremendous drought in the Sahel. And so I had an opportunity with my medical school classes and professors to spend time dealing with everything from how we would help engineer water systems and wells to whatever. Later, I have a daughter named Mandela, who is the first child in the world named after the president, and he was in jail. And so my daughter, who is a designer in New York, is 28. And I had an opportunity working with, in fact, Senator Perkins and some people. We all were involved in the anti-apartheid movement in a very, very serious way. Helped build a national movement here. And I, as a partner at a Wall Street firm, ended up being assigned to help set up the intermediation in South Africa for the transition for the ANC. And I was the global head at Marsh McLennan, which big strategy and risk thing. I ran the country restructuring business. And I headquartered, and I still own a home in South Africa in Joburg. So I spent a lot of time working on those problems. And I continued to do that, but now I'm in the development business. So I actually have my family's money on the line in a bunch of different ways. We're doing power plants, base power, so they're very large. And we're also doing buses because some partners and we acquired a bus manufacturing company, and we're trying to export buses as well. And then we're doing some steel stuff. So we're doing a number of different things in Africa. So it's from that framework that I wanted to talk to you about getting involved, what it takes to get involved. And I think the first thing is the lessons here are applicable in the United States as well. They're not just applicable in Africa, they could also be applicable in the Caribbean. The first thing is that you have to be an entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is somebody who has strategic thinking, organizes themselves in their mind, is willing to do research, is very, very focused, and understands what risk-taking behavior is. I like to play poker. And one thing you got to learn very early, if you don't want to go broke, is going all in all the time is not the best strategy. One has to learn how to husband one's resources. Be very, very strategic with it. It takes a lot of money to get involved in Africa, but there's some just very, very simple things to understand. First off, you have to have domain expertise, meaning you have to know something about something. You can't just show up and assume that our brothers and sisters in Africa are like in a Tarzan movie and just running around with spears. We have highly sophisticated people with the most advanced degrees in the world who have done many, many different things. The fact that neocolonialism has held back, and colonialism has held back the development of our continent, and the fact that it was a toy for the Cold War, does not mean that the people are somehow ignorant. And so when people go, it's very important in any emerging market work to not be arrogant or chauvinistic, but rather to be very, very intuitive and sensitive. And that's critical because the three things that you have to succeed are you have to know something so you can add value. You have to, in the United States, or in Europe or Asia, as Lenny was pointing out, have to be aligned with some players in the supply chain. People who have products and solutions that can make a difference. And you have to be aligned with those people because one of their big problems happens to be that the way in which our big enterprises operate, there's very little flexibility. They need people who understand how they operate, who have experience with them and some credibility with them to be able to set up operations in these countries. So it's very, very interesting. There aren't that many American companies that are involved in Africa. They view the risks of credit, the risks of health, many different other kinds of risk security from going there. So you actually have an opportunity that you would have thought you'd have had in America as an African American, that you could represent your community to the marketplace, but that doesn't exist, right? I mean, a few people own some McDonald's or something, but in terms of there being an African American entrepreneurial class that, in quote, controls the commerce of this huge that doesn't exist. In Africa, there's an African economy with people who look like us, and there is that opportunity. There is that opportunity where GE isn't going to have you representing them in Newark. You could be representing them in Cote d'Ivoire or Niger or wherever on the African continent. The other key issue in this acculturation and having domain expertise and supply chain is that you're going to have to be willing to learn a language. Everybody don't speak
English is not good
English.
enough?
No, it did not. Especially in very important places like Angola. Portuguese is the language. In all of French West Africa. And by the way, we just won an assignment in Cote d'Ivoire to handle all their waste and trash. And it's very interesting in a partnership with AECOM and Autocar. But what's interesting about those people is that they don't want to be under the French boot anymore. Everybody's looking to having an American opportunity. The other part of this is that, and I represent in partnership with a lot of major Chinese companies. Our Chinese brothers and sisters have not necessarily had the best cultural position. So there are even opportunities to work with the Chinese and their corporate structures in regards to the supply chain in Africa. The last thing I'll talk about, because our time is so very short, is B2B. Now, Lenny and I have been involved in all this infrastructure stuff. The internet is really emerging in Africa. Everybody got a cell phone. The problem has been the bandwidth in Africa is not such that you can get streaming and all kinds of things. Well, what's good about that on our side is if we have those supply chain relationships for different kinds of goods, products that people do want to buy. You don't need the most sophisticated websites. You don't need millions of moving parts. You need straight ahead, good information type things. And if you go to Africa, you can meet entrepreneurs who can't come here and get those supply chain B2B relationships. And you can set up a very advantaged from a tax and other standpoint situation where you can become a significant supplier of U.S. goods or other people's goods. We were just had the Canadians hosted us. I can tell you there are a bunch of Canadian companies. They aren't at the scale of the U.S. companies, but they make good stuff, and you can call on those people as well. So the idea, bottom line is, you need to go, when you go on the ground, you need to read every paper you can. Before you get there, you need to read every paper you can. You need to go online and type in who the 50 most influential people in the country. Look who they are. Contact them, build a trip report so that you go. Spend 2 weeks on the ground. Get a feel of the vibration of the place. Try to get some referrals. Don't try to close a deal. Go and try to find somebody that you can partner with and get a sense of what might be, and you're going to go back and forth and do that kind of work. That's the work it takes. Most importantly, getting that local partner, and then figuring out on this side, who in the supply chain, who are these big companies that manufacture, supply, and distribute, who can you represent with your partnership to that particular country or multiple countries, because we also have trade groups in these different countries. All of us can talk forever. I hope this was a little helpful, and happy to answer any kind of questions and be a steering column. Thank you.
So Terry Coxum is here. She's the United States Small Business Administration Office of Advocacy and Regional Advocate for New York, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico, and the United States Virgin Islands. We're going to take a moment to give her an opportunity to say hello and share a little bit about her work and how it contributes.
Thank you so much, Senator. Mike.
A little short here, sorry.
I'm going to really be brief because I'm here as a resource, and so I just want to tell you what we have available, and then we can move along and you can ask questions so that we can help you move the needle in building wealth. First of all, I know all of you are familiar with the Small Business Administration. So the Small Business Administration is responsible, or the Small Business Administration helps and will assist you with counseling and training, contracting with government, and capital access. So those are the three things that they can help you with. But I'm not sure if you're also familiar that the Small Business Administration has an international trade program. And that international trade program is designed to help small business enter and expand into international markets. They also have an export working capital program, and that assists with centers in need of exporting, with small business, with lenders in meeting needs of exporting and seeking short-term export working capital. And third, the technical assistance part, the Small Business Administration can help with exporting assistance, with their Exporting Assistance Center. So what I've done is I've just brought along some of the resource guides, and I'll make them available to you, and you can find out more about the Small Business Administration's programs that can help you with doing business in Africa. In addition to that, I wanted you to know that you also have an advocate in the federal government. And that advocate in the federal government is actually me. I'm responsible for working with small business on regulatory concerns. So what does that mean for you? It means that we understand the importance of small business And a lot of you have heard the statistics the Office of Advocacy has put out. So we know that 99.7% of all business is small business, and that small business employ half of all our private payroll tax. But did you also know that small businesses account for 97.5% of all exporting firms, and they only account for 31.4% of the value of exported goods. So there is a huge gap there. There's a need, and everyone in this conference is interested in doing business with Africa. There is a need that can be met. We have the panelists that are here that can talk you through some of the barriers and changes, and you have the Office of Advocacy that's responsible for working with businesses on regulatory concerns that can help you with regulatory concerns. And so I'm here as a resource, and I won't take up too much more of your time, but if you're interested in having someone, an advocate in the federal government that can help you with that, then I'm here to do that. I also wanted to add that my boss, Dr. Winslow Sargent, was actually a part of that conference that the ambassador spoke about, and he's also a small business owner and understands the importance of doing business in Africa. So thank you so much.